Virtue signaling is when you go way out of your way, like way out of your way, to make sure that people know that you are not a bad person, right? You talk about how you could never be racist because you don't see color. You just see humans. Okay? All right? That's virtue signaling, right? I think that virtue signaling is really lame, and people who do that constantly annoy me, but I'm going to break that rule right now because I feel like this week's topic is not a good one. Doesn't make me look good talking about it. All right. I don't know why I'm so sensitive to it. It's just gross. It is a real gross. I don't understand how you can look at the backside of a sheep or a dog or a cow or a horse or whatever and think, yeah, no, I don't get it. So that's probably why I think, and I think really it's because I don't get it, that we're looking at 5 stories about bestiality this week. I am so sorry, but we'll get through this one together. It's our weird world.
Our weird world.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and yeah, wrapping up season 2, year 2 of this dumb little show. 104 episodes. All right, 2 sets of 52. It's 52 weeks in a year. All right, get the math on that. Done this every week for 2 years. That is commitment. All right. I know a lot of celebrities who just can't even do this. And celebrities don't do anything. But closing it out with a bang, all right? And look, here's the thing. We've had a lot of really super alarming, gross, heavy, just horrifyingly terrible stories, episodes so far. You know, David Parker Ray stands out. Albert Fish, Joseph Fritzl. All right. A lot of them. Fred and Rosemary West. Terrible. All kinds of. This episode's up there just because just the act in and of itself is gross. And look, we had an episode that kind of had elements of that in the past, the Peter Kürten episode. Went a little hard with the German accent, you know, kind of explaining how you would, bugger some, that's the British way of saying it, certain size dogs. All right. That was a fun time for everybody. But yeah, man, just, I don't even want to do this episode, but we're gonna. So let's just get it over with. It's story time. All right, like I mentioned earlier, looking at 5 stories today. Stories of George Spencer, Margaret Lovett, Malcolm Brenner, Kenneth Pinion, and our first one today of Thomas Granger. And we start at the Plymouth Colony in 1642. Thomas Granger, he was a teenager. He was just living life as a pilgrim colonist, a teenager at the peak of his young adult life, probably halfway through his life expectancy at this point. And he was working for a woman named Love Brewster in the town of Duxbury, tending the crops and doing, whatever else, pilgrim teenagers did back then. But like most teenagers, Thomas was just a slave to his own hormones and was understandably curious about all of the tingly feelings going on in his nether regions. And so on September 8th, 1642, Thomas Granger was hanged for buggery, which, like I said, that's an adorable term for what it actually means. Because that it's the British term to refer to someone or something that has been sodomized by someone else. So he buggered just the entire stable, basically. Granger buggered a horse, a cow, 2 goats, a sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey. How do you do a turkey? Like, hear me out, all right? The horse, the cow, the goats, the sheep, I get all of that. You can easily find where you need to go if you're going to do it, all right? A turkey, where do you go? Like, surely it's like there's so many feathers in there that it's hard to see. You really got to commit to that. And at what point, when you're rooting around the back end of a turkey, do you not stop and be like, man, what am I doing? Should I be doing this? I should stop. Like, maybe, and I hope, honestly, I hope the turkey was the last straw. I hope for society's sake that he had started with the horse or the cow and he had eventually worked his way down to the turkey, to where he is so far gone that we're all just glad that he got hanged. All right. I don't know. All right. But like, he just could not control himself. And here's what's crazy. This is the hardcore way that the Pilgrims were about things. Before his own hanging, all right, each of Thomas's victims, victims, was carted out in front of him and slaughtered in front of him and thrown into a pit. Like, that's hardcore, all right? Because he's defiled all of these animals. They had to kill a whole cow and a whole horse and 2 baby cows and 2 goats and a sheep and that turkey. That turkey got to be the most confused animal on the whole planet at that point. I don't know why I'm just fixated on the turkey. That just fascinates me. But that's got to be just an emotionally damaging hanging, not just for Thomas, who, we get that, but for all of the people around. Because, look, you're in the New World, livestock probably pretty sparse, pretty low numbers there. They're very valuable. And you're just going to stick your pecker in them all and render them useless. Like, you could have probably still eaten them and done with them, but, the Pilgrims and how uptight and up their own butts they always were. Like, oh no, a penis touched these. We can't use them anymore. Like, that's extreme. Didn't need to do it, but they did it anyway. And just to drive home a point, slaughtered all of those animals one by one in front of him, threw him in the pit, and then they hanged him. But Thomas's hanging was the first recorded act of bestiality in the New World. Would not be the last. And look, and here's what I like about it. I like that this happened in Massachusetts, all right, not the South, right? Because look, the South gets that reputation, all right. All the Alabamas, Mississippis, Arkansas, Kentucky's, West Virginia's out there, South Carolina probably, probably North Carolina if we're being honest. Just some toothless yokel out there banging a sheep or a cow, whatever. And it didn't happen in the South first, but it happened up north, and that makes me happy. All right. Anyway, our second story happened, I believe, in the same year. Yeah, same year, 1642. George Spencer, who was living in New Haven, Connecticut, so 2 up north, same year, first and second time, suck it. He was working as a servant. He was bald. He was considered just generally just like an ugly dude to everyone in town. Everyone knew George, and everyone thought he was gross and ugly. He also had a glass eye. That didn't help either. All right. Look, I know you can't help it, but when one eye moves like a normal eye and the other eye doesn't, people are going to notice. And I think we're all mature about it now, but inside you're like, ooh, what's going on there? And you can't stop thinking about it. And if you're already bald, and I get it, I'm bald, I get it, and you're already ugly, having a glass eye doesn't help. All right. And honestly, I think if Brad Pitt or Ryan Reynolds had a glass eye, we probably wouldn't think they were as hot as they were. I'm just saying. All right. If you are listening right now and you have a glass eye and you're feeling bad about yourself, I'm sorry. That's just the reality of it. All right. I am probably close to 300 pounds. I get that I'm not super attractive to most people. I've accepted that. All right. It's just how it is. So yeah, later that year, after Thomas Granger was executed for bestiality, a female pig in New Haven gave birth to a deformed one-eyed piglet. All right. And it happens all the time, you know. But the pig's owner immediately believed in just the incredible mental gymnastics that religious people do. The pig's owner immediately believed that this deformed piglet was God's way of proving to everyone that Spencer was a creep and had him arrested. So like rumors are going around. Hey, this Spencer guy, he's ugly. He's creepy. We got to find a way to get rid of him. How do we do that? I don't know. God will give us a sign. God's going to give us a sign. We know this. Oh my God, look at this piglet. There's your sign. It's like God heard us. We have been praying for years. And God finally, because this is how God works, the mysterious ways bit, he's finally given us this sign. All right. So, Puritan leaders quickly agreed that all of this made sense. There was no other explanation. And they believed that Spencer had sex with the mother pig, which then ultimately gave birth to a human pig abomination, because obviously that's how science works, right? Happens every time. At his trial, Spencer was accused of, quote, profane atheistical carriage in unfaithfulness and stubbornness to his master, a course of notorious lying, filthiness, scoffing at the ordinances, ways, and people of God, which is just old-timey Puritan talk for this dude's really bad. All right. Authorities offered Spencer a plea deal in which they would show mercy on him if he just confessed to porking the pig. See what I did there? And since his trial had just followed that of a convicted child molester who was subsequently severely whipped in public in front of everyone, Spencer thought, all right, well, if I take this plea deal, they're not going to do anything to me. So he took it thinking he was going to walk free. However, he was then informed that his plea deal still came with a death sentence, which is like the worst plea deal ever. It's like, hey, we're going to offer you a deal. All right. You confess to having sex with this pig, we're going to kill you. If you don't confess to it, we're still going to kill you. All right. Oh, praise the Lord. So like when he found out that his plea deal with the confession, he was still going to get killed, he recanted the statement, but then he confessed to it. And then he recanted again because at this point, he's just really confused. He doesn't know what to do. He would prefer to not be killed, but it seems like every option is leading to his eventual death. But because prosecutors, and according to Puritan law, needed 2 witnesses to confirm the crime, they chose Spencer's retracted confessions and the deformed piglet as their 2 witnesses, which I don't understand how a spoken word and a baby piglet can testify and affirm evidence. Puritans, man. I don't know. But that's what they did. And both Spencer and the deformed piglet were killed on April 8th of the following year. And just crazy. So, moving to more modern times, 100 years into the future. And in the 1960s, on the island of St. Thomas, the esteemed government organization known as NASA, we all know them, put people in space, put people on the moon. They do a lot of cool things. All right. They built a dolphinarium that housed 3 dolphins that used to work on the television show Flipper. Right. And the goal that NASA wanted to accomplish was to teach these dolphins how to speak English as a way to communicate with aliens. Because, oh man, the 1960s was just a real strange time to be alive, right? We had the episode last year just about crazy government experiments and, Acoustic Kitty and Fantasia with the foxes, all the kind of weird stuff, all right? NASA and the U.S. government was like, hey, dolphins are pretty smart. What if we taught them English and then they could communicate with aliens? Because aliens speak dolphin. We're on a lot of drugs right now. A woman named Margaret Howe Lovett was assigned to monitor and train the dolphins on the island of St. Thomas. And to make them as comfortable as possible, Lovett had the entire complex flooded with a few feet of water so that she and the dolphins could live together in this dolphinarium day and night. All right. 5 weeks into the experiment, Peter, the lone male dolphin in the experiment, began exhibiting signs of some sexual attraction to Lovett, which is problematic for a couple of reasons. One, Peter had two perfectly, dolphin-y looking dolphins, female dolphins, that he could be attracted to, neither of which were Margaret Lovett. Margaret, in case you weren't aware, she's a person. She is a female person. And look, because I can only assume that dolphins show traction the same way that dogs do, humping legs and stuff, Lovett eventually just got really tired of constantly pushing Peter away. And instead of leaving, instead of trying to encourage Peter to go and hump the other dolphins, Margaret just decided to handle things herself. All right. Any visual that you want to come up with. All right. It's weird. All right. Now look, there's a documentary. I think it's called Dolphin Lover. It has a diagram of how they could have done it. It's weird. It's so weird. Even if she's just given the dolphin a handy, weird. It's so weird. But she was doing it constantly, a lot. And to make things weirder, as part of the experiment to teach dolphins English, they were also being paid by the government to give dolphins LSD just to see what would happen, just for funsies. All right. Maybe it would help them learn English faster. Who knows? Unfortunately, and not surprisingly whatsoever, when the LSD couldn't make the dolphins talk, the lab lost all of its funding and Margaret, was forced to move away. Peter lost his sugar mama and he fell into a really deep depression, so much so that Peter killed himself by drowning. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does a dolphin drown? Seems impossible, right? Well, it's because dolphins, they have to consciously think about every breath they take, just like you are right now, called manual breathing. You are now manually breathing. Think about it. Got to take a breath right now, don't you? Yeah. Suck it. Anyway. But yeah, dolphins, that's their entire life. And so Peter just decided one day he's going to take one giant breath, and then he just sank to the bottom and he never breathed again and he killed himself, which is, that is so emo, man. Margaret, she actually ended up marrying the photographer who chronicled all of the experiments at the dolphinarium. Did he ever take photos of Margaret blowing a dolphin? Who knows? I don't know if she actually did that. But what if he did? What if she did? And what if he has photographic evidence of it? And then he married her because he either just had no self-worth or he was a mega pervert, thought he could get a little dolphin threesome action going. I don't know how that would work. All right. But even weirder, the two converted, they moved back to St. Thomas. And they converted the dolphinarium into their own home and raised 3 daughters there, which, they probably drained it and they just had it as a regular house. But that's still weird. Raising your kids where you were wiping up dolphin jizz all over the place. That's disgusting. Oh God. Okay. Anyway, Uh, next story is of Malcolm Brenner, who worked at the now defunct Florida Land amusement park in Sarasota, Florida, in the 1970s. Florida Land's kind of like a SeaWorld type park where it featured a bunch of sea life shows and exhibits and all that kind of stuff. During a photography session, Malcolm was a photographer there at the park. During a photography session with the park's dolphins, one of the dolphins, Dolly, swam up to Malcolm and allowed him to rub her. You know, just probably super platonic at this point. Malcolm just gently ran his hands down her back, her rubbery back. I've felt a dolphin before. I did a dolphin swim. Very rubbery. You know, whatever. Ran his hands all the way down her back to her tail. And at that point, man, it was over. Sparks flew. It was love at first rub, I guess. Malcolm would then use his good relationship with the park staff to then get some private time in the dark with the dolphins after closing time. And this allowed Malcolm and Dolly to just explore their carnal relations on several occasions. And again, if you're having problems visualizing how this worked, I don't blame you because it's not supposed to work. All right. But they figured it out, and I'm going to tell you how. All right. So imagine a man who is standing, and then imagine a dolphin standing on its tail. All right. And if the dolphin is of similar height, which I think Dolly was, the dolphins, I think it's called a cloaca, would be right in the same ballpark, in the same region as a male. And at that point, you know, it's like a glory hole, just a fishy glory hole. You just walk right up to it, and it's just bloop right up in there. And that's what Malcolm and Dolly did multiple times. All right. Malcolm called the lovemaking a transcendental experience. I'm sure it was, in a film that he voluntarily interviewed for called Dolphin Lover. I'm sure you can still find this film somewhere. If you want to watch it, go for it. I'm not going to do it because that's weird. All right. No one at the park ever knew about Malcolm's escapades while they were happening. And even if they did, it was all completely legal because Florida, all right? Florida didn't enact a bestiality law until 2011. So like, even if he had gotten caught, like he probably just gets fired and that's it. Everything was completely legal. It was completely legal to bang a dolphin and probably any other kind of animal in Florida up until 2011. And that's not surprising at all, right? Our last story here, thank God, is the story of Kenneth Pinion, who seemingly normal guy, as they all are, living near the greater Seattle area. He worked for Boeing. He had a wife and kids, like totally normal guy. But after a motorcycle accident in which he lost the ability to feel certain special sensations, if you know what I mean, Kenneth got weird. And, you know, like he became increasingly more interested in extreme sexual acts because he needed to, he still desperately wanted to feel something. He needed to just distribute some free literature all over the place. He still wanted to do that. But because of his accident, it was very difficult to. So he got into shoving large objects inside of his body, like fists or baseball bats, you know, huge jars and bottles and stuff. And then, thanks to the internet, Kenneth met a group of men who shared similar interests. And they began meeting in person at a farm in rural King County, where they took turns not banging the horses, but getting banged by the horses. So, you already know where this is going, right? And because that clearly wasn't enough, they then started filming each other getting just reamed by horses and then posting that footage online. All right. Kenneth, he quickly became the leader of this weird group. and developed an online alias named Mr. Hands. I don't know why that's funny to me, where he distributed various forms of zoophile porn. Some people believe, because they have too much free time to think about these things, that Kenneth, there's a lot of debate in I don't know what community this is, but there's a lot of debate apparently in the zoophile community that Kenneth, he wasn't a true zoophile because he didn't really care about the horse's needs. All right. He just really cared about the feeling of a gigantic horse wiener crammed inside of his rectal cavity. He didn't care how it felt to the horse, which I think is the clear distinction between a zoophile and whatever kind of pervert Kenneth Pinion was. I don't understand the darkest corners of the internet, but these are the kinds of conversations happening there. All right. So on July 2nd, 2005, on a farm near Enumclaw, Washington, Kenneth met up with James Michael Tate and another man to, get railed by their favorite horses, as they did. And after letting the horse do its thing, Kenneth collapsed. And Tate knew that this time it was serious, apparently. So he dropped Kenneth off at the hospital, where Kenneth did die in the emergency room. And after a brief examination, doctors noted that Kenneth had died of acute peritonitis, which occurred after the horse had ripped Kenneth's colon open. It's so gross. Police quickly put the pieces together and investigated the farm that Kenneth had visited. They found hundreds of hours of video depicting Kenneth and other men getting just plowed by all of these horses. And they also learned that the farm had become a popular meeting place for people who wanted to have sex with other animals. Police were eventually able to track down Tate and arrest him. Tate was charged with first-degree criminal trespassing because the owners of the farm had no idea that their animals were being exploited as porn stars. Sure, they didn't. How oblivious are you that you don't know that your animal, you don't notice your animals acting differently? You don't see all of the footprints. I don't know. I don't believe that these owners didn't know. They were totally aware of it. Tate entered into something called an Alford plea, which basically means he maintained his innocence, but admitting that the overwhelming amount of evidence against him would likely influence a jury to convict him of the charges. And ultimately, Tate was given a 1-year suspended prison sentence, a $300 fine, and 1 day of community service. Which that's got to be weird for the people that he ended up serving with. It's just like, what are you here for? My buddy got banged by a horse and died, and I let it happen. What about you? I was just here for theft, man. Like, what? White people, am I right? After the trial ended, Washington state politicians decided it was a good time to put a bestiality law in the books. Yeah. The act had actually been legal. Here's what's crazy. You think Florida was bad? Bestiality had actually been legal in Washington state since 1976 after having that section of their sodomy law repealed the previous year. Like, what's going on in 1975 where it's like, I do declare, I don't know why he's a Southern plantation owner in this, but it's happening, that we should repeal this section of our sodomy laws to say that man cannot sodomize or be sodomized by an animal. You're saying we should get rid of that? I do declare that is what we should do. Why? Probably because it will never happen, not because I have a keen interest in feeling the hard circular nature of a horse's member inside of my own body, but probably because it will never happen. Sure, whatever. Kill it. I don't care. The bill, that was a weird bit. I'm sorry. The bill, which ended up passing in 2006 without a single negative vote, which, made bestiality a Class C felony in Washington state. And that, thankfully, is the end of our stories. what we're going to do. I'm not going to do What Did We Learn This Week? I think it's the first time I've ever skipped it. And honestly, I don't want to rehash anything. All right. I think we've learned a lot about ourselves in this episode, learned a lot about people and what makes people do things. All right. And I don't want to rehash it. So we're just going to go ahead and skip on to the end here. Next week on Our Weird World, we're starting year 3. All right. On a much better note. All right. March, if you didn't know, and you probably didn't, March is Women's History Month. And so we're going to close out the month of March talking about some great women in history. All right. We're going to look at the stories of the Trung sisters, Princess Olga, Betty Lou Oliver, and a group of nuns who just did not care about the government and what laws were. It was a really fun story. So we're going to do that. And then just looking ahead, what can you expect in year 3? We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. All right. We're going to have lots of true crime. We're going to talk about Ted Kaczynski. We're going to have a show about ghost ships, utopias, some mysteries. We're going to have a episode about some Texas cryptids and paranormal stuff. We're going to have an episode about the Alamo Christian Foundation, episode about cannibals, Serial Killer September coming back again, of course. Gonna get into all the spooky paranormal stuff in October. There's actually 5 Mondays in October, so there's gonna be 5 Halloween themed episodes this year, and just a couple of other fun stuff. We'll talk about Ted Bundy, some other serial killers and true crime and all that kind of stuff, and Jim Jones, cult leaders, and all that kind of stuff. So fun year of episodes waiting for you up ahead. Can't wait to jump into all of those. So yeah, hope you've been enjoying it. Hope you keep telling your friends. It's really cool to just see how this show has just kind of grown steadily since day one, and I really do appreciate all of you who continue to listen. And yeah, that's going to be it. Thanks for listening. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.